10 years down the line, probably?
Most of the immediate future stuff, I think the bigger challenge is going to be more human than technology.
Hello and welcome everyone to the next episode of the AIM Media House podcast Simulated Reality. Today we have with us the managing partner of a new startup, Oxo AI, Amaresh Tripathy. Hi Amaresh, how are you today?
Very good, Kashyap. How are you doing? Pleasure to be here.
Yes, I'm doing well as well. Thank you so much for asking. So Amresh, we decided to do this podcast because, we keep talking about really interesting subjects and emerging technologies in the AI space. And these days, the buzzword is an AI co-pilot. Everybody wants to build a co-pilot.
Correct.
And I'm really looking forward to understand what it is because, some of the peers that I spoke to, they said that, when it comes to co-pilot, just think of Iron Man. which was which was a very funny way of looking at it. But to set the context, right, can you help us understand what is the definition of a AI co-pilot, or also help us understand what is a co-pilot and then how AI enables it? Let's set the context and then maybe we can discuss further.
Sure. I'll just start with my definition of how I think about Copilot and in what context, right? That's your point. So the easiest definition of a Copilot is thinking about what is the optimal man-machine configuration to do a task or to do a job, right? And there's a difference between those two, which is let machines do what machines are good at, let humans do what humans are good at, and if that marriage of doing the work is essentially what a copilot enables, right? So it's essentially a AI companion to the work. There are many types of copilot, and there's like, I think the definition is still emerging. There are copilots in the context of a task, right? You're writing a copy, or you are trying to produce music, or you're trying to kind of write a letter. So there's some specific, or write an email. There's some specific task stuff that you're doing. There could be copilots for that. Or what our perspective is, that's going to be everywhere, the task copilots. And then they are thinking about the job. Like you are doing a job is a set of tasks interwoven together, and you could have a copilot at a job level, right? If you're a teacher, you do multiple set of things. If you are a actuary, you do multiple things. You do multiple tasks in your job. So you could have a copilot at a task level or at a job level. So basically, it is a AI. I don't like the word assistant because it means that the machine is subservient to you, but it's probably more of a companion. That's essentially how I define copilots.
Okay, you said you don't like to call it assistant. Why is that? Isn't what you just explained essentially what an assistant does? There must be a reason for it, right?
So if you're doing reasoning, or if you're someone is generating ideas, it's almost a colleague at that point in time, right? If you and I are chatting and you are generating ideas, or I'm saying, hey, Kashyap, give me a few starting points around something like this. I'm treating you as a colleague. You are not an assistant to me at that point in time, or I'm not an assistant to you at that point in time. I'm a companion to you. So it's a little bit more kind of an equal setting. And a lot of the knowledge workers need companions, not assistant. Assistant is kind of also, it kind of gives you a flavor of what RPA used to do, which is like, okay, bots will kind of work for you. It's not that. It's a little bit more than that. It's the reasoning aspect, the creative aspect of it.
Okay, so I think it's more to do with the intelligence of it that
It's the
it is,
reasoning
right?
aspect of it. Like, yeah, there's a
Yeah.
brain perception. So basically, there are perception agents that are like brain, or which is kind of the reasoning agents, and then there are like kind of almost like action agents. It's all three of them come together.
Correct. So just to kind of set the context, right? I'll give you an example and you tell me whether you think it is a co-pilot or
Sure.
not, right? So first one is ChatGPT. Is ChatGPT a co-pilot?
You could use, so let me just, you could use any of them in a co-pilot form, right?
Okay.
uh, which is why I think the definition is not only, Copilot is not only a technology, it's a technology of how you actually wrap around how you would use it. So ChatGPT, if you're asking a question and you use it as a search engine, yes, it's kind of a Copilot in this sense. But if you are using ChatGPT to say, hey, listen, make me a travel itinerary, or give me a starting ideas, or if you're then you are using it as a Copilot. So Copilot is almost like kind of how you are also using it rather than kind of what you're asking it to do.
Okay. What if something like a chatbot? Let's say there's a ticketing system and there is a chatbot. Is that a co-pilot?
No, It's, I mean, in that case, it is, I mean, it's the interaction. I mean, it's any of the bots. I mean, it's more of an assistant at that point in time. It's an assistant to kind of go and do that. That's the notion between an assistant and a companion that I try to kind of call out, which is where you are actually going and using it as a peer versus you're asking it to do things.
Fantastic. I think now we have set the context really well, and this is really helpful, right? Now let's talk about a little bit around what is happening today. I want to understand some of the use cases that are happening. And one of the things that I learned it very recently I think it was through a conversation or a market research report that I was seeing in terms of the impact and its time, right? Timeline to do that, right?
Yeah.
Which are some of the high impact but low time, I mean, lesser time is needed to build them, which will immediately we will see in the market or already seeing. Like, you can give this example of Oxo AI as well, which you have started, right? Which are
So,
the areas which are high impact but at the lower this thing that you are building?
yeah. So there's a broader framework that I see of broader generative AI impact that is there, which I think I kind of refer to kind of John Swiftler and Paul Bear's work, which is this whole WINS framework, right? If you think of a 2 by 2 and say which are the tasks that have words, images, numbers, sounds, WINS framework, right? And on the x-axis, on the y-axis, think about which of the work has been digitized, how much digitization has already happened, right? And if
Okay.
you put industries or if you put functions, let's say if we want to do that on that 2 by 2, you suddenly start getting a very interesting picture. So let's say to start with industries, what you would see is very high wins work and very high digitization, education, media, professional services, financial services, right? Which will be on the top right, which is kind of where you see a lot more disruption. I mean, think about it. It's not an accident that most professional services companies are pledging huge amounts of dollars behind this effort, right? It's because it's a disruption. Same thing, we have seen that in education also. On the completely other side, if you're like janitor, if you're working with hands, basically less digitization, less wins who are carpenter, plumber, less disruption right now, right? So that's kind of one way. And you can still put the same thing on a function level, sales, customer service, or in a hospital setting, and like a kind of a emergency room nurse, probably not. It's not of this thing. But if you're a nurse who is doing a lot of prior authorization and kind of doing primary care, it will fall into different things. So that's kind of one framework to kind of start thinking about where the disruption can happen and how quickly could it happen and where's the value.
So digitization was y-axis, x-axis was?
Exercise how much of the work, how much of the role or the work is wins, the words, images, numbers, and sounds, right? Which
Word.
is
Okay.
right. So
Okay.
it's called the wins framework. So like if you're using a lot of words and images and the numbers and sounds in your work, right? If you're a musician, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Actually, it's a lot of wins, right? Or
Fantastic.
if you're an actuary, it's a lot of wins. And obviously, is your work completely digitized? That's kind of you starting laying that out.
Correct, correct. So I think that's a new framework. I did not know about wins, and thank you so much for introducing me to that. I will. So wins versus digitization is a good aspect.
Yeah.
Now maybe let's look at some of the high win, some of the use cases in
Yes.
high wins and high
Sure.
digitization, and let us walk our audience through the process, right? So one of the things, right? I was just speaking with a few friends of mine the other day. They said that Meta is coming with a goggle where you can probably see some of the things in this thing, which gives me very Black Mirror episode vibes which are there, right? But can you help us walk through? Take any use case and
Let's do that.
go in a little bit detail as to how it exactly works. Yeah.
Let's do that. We are, let's say, I'm just talking about, I mean, we are working with a couple of clients in these similar kind of things, not exactly kind of, I'm going to blend it so that it's to protect client confidentiality almost. So let's take two use cases, right? One is the sales use case, right? And this company essentially is, think of it as they provide services that helps companies manage their ESG goals, right? So they kind of have a way to reduce the carbon footprint, and so I'll just leave the like what exactly do they do. But so their whole thing is they have a set of salespeople who are going after, let's say, the Fortune 1000 companies, and they have a couple of industrial manufacturing that they do. They have locations, and they want to essentially leverage, they want to reach out to companies which are close by to their locations, and they have, and those companies should have prioritized ESG goals, right? And they care about ESG, and then the service offering makes sense. So what we're doing is we're doing a sales copilot, and the way the sales promotion works is what we do is for all the companies in their ecosystem, we're essentially creating almost a demand signal generator, right? We ended up creating a, ESG GPT almost. We kind of, for all those 1,000 companies, we are collecting all data. They have a sustainability report. Have they talked about? Have they gone and talked about in the 10K, 10Q reports around net carbon zero or this thing? Have they talked about any programs around sustainability? On the other hand, has EPA fined them? The EPA has done any fines? Are there other regulatory things from a sustainability perspective, from a carbon perspective that they have to kind of follow? So we kind of, are there any jobs that they're looking at on the list of thing about LinkedIn jobs? We kind of collect all that signal, and we have created this basically an NLP framework to score their ESG rating in some ways. And if there are new things come in, we are always kind of continuously looking for it. So think of that demand signal repository. And what happens is now you take that and you very basically quickly say, okay, here is essentially, let's say this is this beverage company, or this is this manufacturing or a drug manufacturing company. And I kind of go and create, based on all the signals, a score. And that score, and then that's when the score changes, it actually triggers the salesperson. Hey, listen, you need to go and have a conversation, right? It doesn't only do that. So that's kind of, okay, who do you want to talk to? But it also says, because they are talking about water, they are talking about zero in landfills, right? Here is the particular offering you should be talking to them about from your current this thing. And by the way, here are the 3 case studies that we have done, which are similar, that you should talk about, right? That's kind of the second piece of it. And third is, hey, by the way, if you don't want to initiate the contact, here is a personalized template email that you can just send. That entire process happens automatically, right? With the salesperson, and the salesperson can say, oh, by the way, I actually met these guys here. This might not be relevant. Let's update that email, or here are the 3 things you should incorporate. The salesperson can bring his or her knowledge and customize it and kind of send a note out. And the same thing, before the meeting, he goes in, the prep around how it actually happens. So think about, who do you contact, what do you want to talk about, and what's the most relevant conversation to have, and the discussion, the materials to send. That's a sales copilot, right? And then you kind of do it again, and then you basically see, okay, you contacted, what actually happened? There's a measurement and framework aspect of it. Did they respond? Did the model get it right? If not, you will get that feedback back, and then the model next time becomes better. So that's an example of a sales copilot that we are working on.
Okay, and essentially, when a person interacts with the copilot, the format they're interacting is text, right? They're putting inputs on it, or it can be different as well.
It could be many different ways. I mean, text is one way. So more and more we are getting into a format where it's normally a Q&A, right? But the Q&A is not even putting in text. The Q&A could be, it could be, okay, here are the charts. Hey, this doesn't make sense to me. Or you could do a click through and say, okay, explain this. And that explanation could be text, or explanation could be another chart. So I think there is an interface that you need to do. The most common one is obviously a chat, but what we find is it's normally not the most effective all the time, right? Because most jobs, actually, you want to narrow the experience around a few questions. Most, like I said, the salesperson, they only care about literally 5-6 things. What happened? When did it happen? What is the core thing that you do? So as you guide that experience through, you will create design elements or user interface elements which are beyond chat. It could be a lot more simpler conversations. It could be more like buttons. It could be clicks, or here are the 3 potential questions that you should ask. And so that way you can go and do that. And if you need to kind of, in our world, you go to do a free form text as the last resort. That's not where you start, because you are guiding them through a set of process that you are trying to do.
Yeah, one of the thoughts that crosses my mind, right? Even when we design something as simple as a website, there are so many thought processes that go behind a good UI UX design, right? in terms of, whether people will click more if we
Yeah.
place the button here or this thing, or even in terms of the functionality, they
Yeah.
should be able to navigate the website really easily.
Yeah.
When it comes to a copilot, especially, this becomes even more important because there are various ways to engage with it, right?
Correct.
Especially, what are some of the challenges that you face when it comes to that? I would also like to understand broader set of technology challenges, but before we go there, I want to understand in terms of the UI, UX, the interface, what are some of the challenges? What are some of the feedbacks that you're getting, especially considering this technology as at such an early stage? What are your some of the early stage learnings from this process?
So if you think about it, I mean, you use the website, right? The website, anything you click, it's a deterministic output, right? Here, anything you click, it's actually a probabilistic output. You I mean, and that fundamentally, that's the big difference, right? How do you design interfaces when the outputs are probabilistic, right?
Mhm.
Number one is you want to obviously define the probabilistic output to a narrow range, which is all hallucination and other things you can probably talk about. But fundamentally, but you also need to start thinking about the interface in that potential case, right? Which and you use it to your advantage. So, for instance, there's a sales assist tool that we have kind of created for Medicare when you are selling Medicare sales that we have done. And instead of basically saying, okay, for instance, you're a patient and say, hey, listen, I want to actually shopping for a health plan, and is MRI covered in my health plan? Right? It's a simple question. The answer is, oh, yes, MRI is covered in health plan. That could be an answer. That's an interface, right? And that's right. I say, oh, by the way, yes, MRI is a health plan, but you have $150 out of pocket. And by the way, in five of these conditions, you might need a prior authorization. That's a much more complete answer. In the sales process, you want to give a complete answer rather than just a factual answer what has been asked. And then what you do is, okay, you can just, that's also an answer. But the right user interface that what we have, what we work with the client is not only that, but say, by the way, here are the three conditions in which you would want to prior authorization. Do you want to know? And then you actually predict the three questions they're likely asked, right? How do you actually get to the prior authorization done? Is how do you calculate copay? How do you actually go and think about, am I already in the copay limit? Those are the most likely next questions they're going to ask. Let's say if they ask it, then you kind of, suddenly it's a click, not a text things. And the agent will be a lot more but they will have more time. They will be able to have more time to engage. So your thing is you want to engage to do what is the sales agent very good at? Having a conversation, understanding your requirement, and trying to kind of guide them to the right thing, right? The less it's actually interacting with the system with the text, more with clicks, it's easier because then you're paying attention a lot more. It's an example, and but the thing is, you just don't know where the thing is going to go, and then the whole thing is probabilistic. The answers could be probabilistic, and the way the discussion is going to be probabilistic. So you design a system that is evolving. The set of questions, the next set of questions that are going to ask depends on what is the starting point. It is very powerful. A probabilistic interface could be very powerful, but you have to be also very careful around how you design it. That's an example of that.
Yeah, I think that helps, yeah, understand in terms of the interface problems. What are some of the broader set of technology problems that you're facing? Obviously, talent might be one because in the sense that it's a new technology. But one of the things that we have observed is that good data science talent is very adaptive. But apart from talent, what are some of the major challenges that you are facing when building a copilot today?
So a few things, right? See, this notion of Copilot, and especially from a technology perspective, I'll bucket in three broad bases. One is I would say this infrastructure, which is not only generative AI. There's a set of generative AI challenges, but there's a broadly AI stack challenges because none of the Copilots uses just Gen AI. It uses a lot of machine learning, right? It uses a lot of like much more other simpler techniques, right? I mean, like decision trees and any of these techniques. So as you start thinking about that, how do you take in, I would say, the ML concepts and Gen AI concepts, and now you think about managing models and ML ops across both of those kind of the tool sets. So one thing is, how do you actually think of an architecture that actually is more comprehensive? We call it hybrid AI right now, hybrid AI architecture than just a Gen AI architecture. That's kind of bucket number one. Second is within the Gen AI architecture, that stuff changes literally on a weekly basis right now, right? And there are things that will give you speed, like you can do a API based kind of a call with OpenAI. It'll be faster. But if in your end state you are going to do hundreds of thousands of calls of a GPT-4, it's going to be very expensive, right? Versus do I do open source? If I do Llama 2, then I have to figure out, okay, how do I get a GPU, right? Where do I kind of program a GPU, which I can't get, right? So that can be short-term challenge around it. And by the way, I need to spend a lot more to fine tune it. So do I fine tune it or do I do better prompt engineering, right? And if I fine tune it, how do I actually organize the Q&A data set, and what data set, how much data set do you have to kind of do that? These are kind of a bunch of questions that you need to answer at the model level. There's a set of questions you need to answer. Hey, how do I manage all my prompts from a prompt layer perspective? How do I think about my governance layer, right? If the two questions the two people in the organization are asking, is there a mechanism I can actually check before sending it to an API? Has this been answered before? So how do I actually think about the governance of that thing, and what is the guardrail that what answer came out? Can I check it with maybe another LLM and do this thing? And how do I, if the errors are there, what is the feedback loop? So the whole design and architecture of just the application, lot of decisions to be made. It's not only challenges. There's a whole series of decisions you need to start thinking about, and those decisions could optimize for speed in the beginning, but then when they optimize for scale, which is most of where it hasn't come there, most of our enterprises are not there, you have to start thinking in a slightly different way, right? So those are kind of the Gen AI's kind of set of questions around that. The third is the whole this whole bias and the like understanding that we talked a little bit about on the governance around it, the hallucination. How do you measure it and how you fix it, and what is the right approach and a governance framework around it? For instance, banks have been doing model validation for many years, right? What can we learn from them to do figure out model validation in this kind of a context? That's another technical set of challenges. And we talked about the UI UX, which I think is a major one that you will do. And then the final one is integration. Any of these copilots and everything are kind of useless if it's standalone. It has to work through a current workflow, right? So think about the entire integration layer that you need to start thinking about all of that. And that's just the technical side of it. You talked about the people side, which is the talent, but also the adoption piece of it. Those are completely separate things. But these are the 4 or 5 broad technical challenges and the issues you need to work through.
Correct. And especially when it comes to the data governance aspect of it, is there still resistance in terms of adoption of copilots or Gen AI as a broader this thing because of these concerns, or people are coming to terms with it, especially if you're considering open source models to kind of build?
I think there is the entire, I just look at the world from a enterprise or Fortune 1000 view of it. In Fortune 1000, we are in the experimentation early stages, right? So I think there's curiosity. That curiosity is turning into, let's see what can it do, and is there any value, right? I think these are the set of questions I think as an industry we are answering right now. If you are able to say, oh, there is value, then okay, what are the risks associated with the value? You are understanding the risk and everything, and how do I mitigate the risk? So I think there's a natural curve and evolution that is happening there. If you were to ask my point of view, yes, I think for a lot of the large enterprises, data security is, even smaller ones, data security is definitely an issue. But how do you actually protect the data security in a very democratized tool like what we have right now is its own set of challenges. So there's a bunch of things being figured out on kind of access and what the policies are. And then there's a whole set of things that you have to figure out in terms of, hey, long term, do I give an API based? Do I do open source in my own environment? And some of the pros and cons of kind of what we talked about, that you have to kind of go and deal with it in that piece of it. So I think those are coming. There's a discussions happening right now, and there's absolutely worry about it. But those worry will lead to solutions as we prove the value and start scaling.
Correct. And another question around this entire responsible use of technology, right? It comes the ethics aspect of it. People have always feared robots will take over. AI, especially AI engineers or AI leaders, have always told that AI will always augment human intelligence. AI will never replace it. But as we move towards copilots and more intelligent automation, is there, your personal opinion, do you hear that there might be some jobs that might be cut because of this, or do you feel that copilots will always augment human beings? And what is your own entire opinion on this subject of it?
Yeah, see, I mean, I'm a general believer of half glass half full, right? And especially on data analytics AI for a very long time. I think it is about amplifying human potential. But having said that, it does not mean jobs will not change. I think the key point is the jobs will change. Jobs won't go away. So and exactly how each and every job will change. Some jobs will change more than the others without a question, right? Like a customer care rep, jobs will definitely change, but more than the others. But what would it look like could be very, very interesting, right? I mean, for instance, I had a great conversation yesterday with one of the Chinese entrepreneurs in this AI, and his point was they have been offering human agents, like in financial services and wealth managers, human agents, and for this thing, and by task, they also offer an option for an AI agent in parallel, right? People can choose either many times. What they find is make the path there are certain tasks like, okay, preparing a will, for instance, where people want to start with an AI agent and then go to the humans. And in some task around, hey, help me think through my asset allocation, they would start with the human agent and then go to AI. So there are different paths. So the point is, I think the jobs will evolve. Will they? And I think people's skill sets has to evolve along that. It's not something that you take lightly. But overall, net, it's a much more amplification of the work rather than replacement.
Okay, okay. I think that makes the world always a little bit calmer. People always fear robots are going to take over,
It doesn't make a very good media story, which is why you hear, I think, a lot more. I mean, it's in the world that like values clicks and likes, taking like robots taking away jobs is a much more fun story than, hey, listen, you're going to get better.
Fair enough. My final question is, what are some of the innovations and technological trends that will define the co-pilot industry? Will chips in brains be co-pilots, or will goggles on, smart goggles be co-pilots? Where do you see this going in the narrow, in a immediate future, as well as in the 10 years down the line, probably?
Most of the immediate future stuff, I think the bigger challenge is going to be more human than technological, right? Kind of just
Okay.
working through the adoption side of it, what it means, like kind of doing that. I think going to goggles and chips and everything will probably hurt the case a lot more than help, right? I mean, I could argue the goggle stuff is already, I mean, augmented, like for a lot of field sales technicians, augmented reality and kind of what you're doing, those kind of use cases have been tried for probably 10 years when Google Glass was there, right? I mean, you have kind of seen at least some prototypes around it. So I think that's just it's another interface in my mind at that point, right? So there will be innovations on interfaces. There will be innovations on the core chip and the computer aspect of it. There'll be innovations all around the stack, which is, I think, fairly normal, right? And the core model, which is actually increasing at a crazy pace. Basically, right now, large language models are learning faster than a human learns, right? And like to think about what a 12-month, what a human learns, large language models are learning faster. So there's a ton of innovation already happening, and I think it will continue to happen. But the core thing, I think, what's going to be important is how do you go for the value and how do you bridge the gap so that people are comfortable using it and leveraging it the right way. And there's a ton of technology innovation that will potentially help and kind of enhance. But if you don't do that, it doesn't really matter.
Okay. On that note, thank you so much, Amaresh, for your time. I think it was a very interesting conversation, packed with insights. It helped me a lot understand AI Copilots better. I hope it does to the audience too. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, Kashyap. You are going deeper into the real meat of the questions, and I'm glad kind of we were having an engaging dialogue rather than just definitions. So thank you for that.